to our temples, while the other end was joined to what is called the Amskamutator, which in its turn was joined in a certain way by means of what are called wires to all the objects within the Har-Har-Hat-Zaha, as well as to those outside, namely to those objects whose visibility was needed during the experiments. It is very interesting to notice here that to each end of that appliance, a creation almost incredible for ordinary three-centered being reason, two independent connectors, also of wire, were led, and through them what are called special magnetic currents flowed from outside. As it was afterwards explained to me in detail, these connectors and the said special magnetic currents had, it seems, been created by that truly great scientist Gurnjieff Har-Har, in order that the presences of learned three-centered beings, even those not perfected to the sacred Inkozarno, might, owing to one property of the magnetic current, be reflected for their own essences, and that, owing to another property of this current, the presence of the mentioned objects might also be reflected, so that thereby the perception of the reality of the said objects might be actualized by their imperfect organs of being sight in a vacuum containing none of these factors, or those results of various cosmic concentrations which have received such vibrations, from the actualizations of which alone the functioning of any being organ whatsoever is possible. Having fitted upon us the said very heavy appliances for enabling beings to exist in a sphere not corresponding for them, the assistance of this, then still great all-universal scientist Gurnjieff Har-Har, with the help again of special appliances, carried us into the Har-Har-Hat-Zaha itself, and having screwed up all the free ends of the connectors projecting from us to the corresponding apparatuses in the Har-Har-Hat-Zaha itself, went out and hermetically closed behind them the only way by which it was still possible, if at all, to have any communication with what is called the everything representing one world. When we were alone in the Har-Har-Hat-Zaha itself, Gurnjieff Har-Har, after turning one of what are called switches there, said, "The work of the pump has already begun, and soon it will have pumped out all the results here without exception of those cosmic processes, whatever they may be, the totality of the results of which is the basis and significance, as well as the process itself, of the maintenance of the existence of everything existing in the whole of this, everything representing one world." And he added in a half-sarcastic tone, "Soon we shall be absolutely isolated from everything existing and functioning in the whole of the universe. But on the other hand, owing firstly to my new invention, and secondly to the knowledge we have already attained for ourselves, we have not only now the possibility of returning to the said world, to become again a particle of all that exists, but also we shall soon be worthy to become non-participating eyewitnesses of certain of these world laws, which for ordinary uninitiated three-brained beings are what they call great inscrutable mysteries of nature, but which in reality are only natural and very simple results automatically flowing one from the other." While he was speaking, one could feel that this pump, another very important part of the whole of his new invention, was perfectly actualizing the work assigned to it by this being with reason. To enable you to represent to yourself and understand better the perfection of this part also of the whole of this new invention of Gurnjieff Har-Har, I must not fail to tell you also about the following. Although I personally as a three-brained being also, had had occasion many times before, owing to certain quite particular reasons, to be in atmosphereless spaces, and had had to exist sometimes for a long time by means of the sacred Krimbulazzo Mara alone. And although from frequent repetition a habit had been acquired in my presence of moving from one sphere to another gradually, and almost without feeling any inconvenience from the change in the presence of the second being food, occurring with the change of the presences of cosmic substances undergoing transformation and which are always around both large and small cosmic concentrations. And also, although the causes themselves of my arising and the subsequent process of my being existence were arranged in an entirely special way, in consequence of which the various being functions contained within my common presence had perforce gradually become also special, yet nevertheless, in spite of it all, the pumping out of the atmosphere by the said pump then proceeded with such force that such sensations were impressed on the separate parts of the whole of my presence that even today I can very clearly experience the process of the flow of my state at that time, and relate it to you almost in detail. This extremely strange state began in me shortly after Gornahur Harhar had spoken in a half-sarcastic tone about our imminent situation. In all my three being centers, namely in the three centers localized in the presence of every three-centered being, and which exist under the names of thinking, feeling, and moving centers, there began to be perceived separately and independently in each of them, in a very strange and unusual way, very definite impressions that there was taking place in the separate parts of my whole planetary body an independent process of the sacred Raskuarno, and that the cosmic crystallizations which composed the presences of these parts were flowing in vain. At first, what is called my initiative of constatation proceeded in the usual way, that is, according to what is called the center of gravity of associative experiencings. But later, when this initiative of constatation of everything proceeding in me gradually and almost imperceptibly became the function of my essence alone, the latter not only became the unique all-embracing initiator of the constating of everything proceeding in me, but also everything, without exception, of that which newly proceeded, began to be perceived by and fixed in this essence of mine. From the moment that my essence began to perceive impressions directly, and to constate independently, that from what was proceeding there was being entirely destroyed, as it were, in my common presence, firstly, the parts of my planetary body, and then, little by little, also the localizations of the second and third being centers. At the same time, a constatation was definitely made that the functioning of these latter centers passed gradually to my thinking center and became proper to it, with the consequence that the thinking center, with the increasing intensity of its functioning, became the unique, powerful perceiver of everything actualized outside of itself, and the autonomous initiator of the constating of everything proceeding in the whole of my presence as well as outside of it. While this strange, and to my reason then still incomprehensible being experiencing was proceeding in me, Gornahur Harhar himself was occupied in pulling some levers and switches, of which there were very many at the edge of the table where we were placed. An incident which happened to Gornahur Harhar himself changed all this being experiencing of mine, and